Well, hello everyone, and welcome to week 38 of my life as an L3 CTS cadet pilot. It's week 7 of my life here in New Zealand. So what have we been up to this week? Well, thank God the weather's finally improved. Managed to get flying again, and we wasn't being thrown around all week, so managed to get 2 flights in this week. And they were Circuits Variance, and that was a dual flight, and we also did practiced force landings. Roll titles. So what exactly does circuit variance entail? Well, it's basically your normal circuit but with a few extra things thrown in. So your normal circuit, you take off, you come round and then you land again. It's just a very basic circuit. You get very good at this very quickly. Circuit variance sort of covers some of the emergency procedures that you can encounter. So for example, one of the things that we cover in circuit variance is engine failure after takeoff, or it's more commonly known as an FATO, which is EFATO, engine failure after takeoff. And basically what will happen is you'll be doing your takeoff run, you'll get off the ground, and then say at like, I don't know, 700 feet, your instructor will say, my throttles, close the throttles and say, simulated engine failure. And what you've got to do at this point is pick a field within 30 degrees of your current heading and pretend that you'd actually had an actual engine failure and you was going to be landing in that field. Obviously, the instructor will give you full power well before you gets down to a low altitude. So usually it's literally close throttles, pick a field, pitch vest glide, pick a field. By the time you've done all that and you've started configuring for the landing, your instructor's already said, yeah, I'm happy, go around full power. Another thing that's included in circuits variance is what's known as a glide approach. And again, this is something that simulates the engine has fouled. They can do it either on downwind or on base leg, although in theory it can be done any time, but generally here at L3 we generally do it on downwind and base legs. And what happens is you close the throttles all the way, and the idea is that you have to land on the runway, ideally bang on the 1,000-foot markers without using any throttle changes. So what you do is you fly a much tighter second stage of circuit, so you won't fly like a box shape, it sort of turns into like a giant curve, but the final section remains fairly straight in. But the problem with having no power is you have a very limited amount of control over your altitude. So the ideal thing with doing a glide approach is to aim long and be high. And then once you know you're going to make the runway, you start introducing flat to bring that aiming point back. It takes a bit of practice and skill to get it right, but it's really satisfying when you put it on the start of the runway at your target airspeed. And the final thing that you do in circuits variance is you simulate that you've had a flaps failure. So for example, the motors are packed up and you're unable to extend the flaps. What the difference that a flapless approach makes is that your approach speed is a lot faster and your nose pitch attitude is a lot higher. So naturally, if you're approaching faster and with a high nose attitude, 2 things will happen during your landing flare. One, you won't have to flare anywhere near as much because your nose is already up in the air. And number 2, because you've got very little drag on the aircraft, because you've got no flap out, it will not want to land, it will just float down the runway. So it's really critical to narrow your airspeed. One of the things that I generally do on my flapless approaches, I generally allow for a slightly longer final approach. It just allows me to get a bit more room to get the airspeed right back, because if you pass say for example 500 feet above the airfield and you're 10 knots above your target speed, you're not going to get your airspeed down to the landing speed. So it's really important to narrow your airspeed, and again it's one of those things, it will come with practice. I think that lesson was an hour and a half and it was pretty knackering. I mean, regular circuits is pretty tiring, but when you're throwing in flat failures and engine failures in amongst all that, on top of all the normal traffic that we have to deal with and air traffic control, throwing a few curveballs in, and if you're really unlucky, you might have an Air New Zealand flight show up and completely screw your plan up. So it's pretty intense, but it went well. The weather wasn't too bad. I think there was like, what was it? I think it was probably about an 8-knot crosswind, so there was a fair bit of crosswind, but it wasn't too bad. It was a lovely day, not much turbulence. Anyhow, and then after that lesson, a few days later, I think it was 3 days, we then took that knowledge that we learned about engine failures within the circuit and applied it outside of the circuit in what's known as practiced forced landings, also known as PFLs, and it's essentially you and an instructor will go out the control zone. You'll be flying along, and then the instructor will say, okay, your engine's just fouled. He closes the throttle and says, right, your engine's just fouled, what are you going to do? And when you first do this, you just worry about flying the aircraft, so you pitch reverse glide, you pick the field that you're going to go into, and you fly the procedure that you've been taught. There's a few ways you can do this. The method that I was taught before coming here, and the method that I've also been taught here at L3, is the high key, low key method. Just depends on what altitude you're at. It depends on whether you target high key or low key. I think low key is at about 1,000 to 1,500 feet, which if you're at that altitude, you should probably turn to point your nose downwind. If you're a lot higher, say 2,500 to 3,500 feet, then you should turn your nose into wind, and that's known as high key. Essentially what you've got to do is fly a circuit, but without an engine. So once again, you've got to control your descent rate, particularly at the end, using flaps. And when you're very low, you should only really put flap out once you know you're going to make the field, because if you try retracting flap at a low altitude, you lose lift and you can actually sink the aircraft. And if worst case, you can stall it. So you've got to be very careful and know what you're doing with this thing. But it was quite funny actually, because that day I've never seen a weather forecast like it. It was basically cav OK, so no cloud, very good visibility. I think it was 50 kilometres that day, and the wind was variable at 2 knots, and even the 2,000 foot wind was variable at 5 knots. So it meant that we didn't really have to apply any wind correction during the practice force landings, or even when we arrived back in the circuit. But it was quite funny actually, because there was four aircraft, including mine, we was all doing exactly the same thing, and yeah, there was a couple of occasions where we all wanted to go for the same field, so that got rather entertaining at a couple of points. It was just like, this is my field, no, it's mine. Yeah, I think we ended up going north towards a place called Morrinsville. There's a few good fields out there that we ended up going to, and it seemed like everyone else was staying south of Matamata. So eventually managed to get some undisturbed PFLs in. But yeah, and a bit of a first coming back into Hamilton. I don't know if you're aware, is that Hamilton has actually got 3 runways. It's got 2 parallel runways, so 1836 left and right. One of them's over 2 kilometres long, the other one's only 630 metres long, and it's very narrow. I think the aircraft I fly is actually wider than the runway, so you've really got to nail the landing. But because it was no wind was around, there was almost no turbulence, the controllers gave me, I think it was runway 18 right, which is the short runway, which I've never landed on before, so I was like, alright, I'll give it a go. I've been offered it a couple of times before, but when there's been a bit of a crosswind, you kind of want the wider runway, but when there's no crosswind, it's worth going. And almost nailed the landing. I think if I held the nose up a fraction longer, it would have been an absolute greaser, but hey, not too bad for a first attempt. But it was a good flight. I was actually supposed to do my circuit variance hour-and-a-half solo flight at the end of the week, but unfortunately weather played a bit of a part for that. Even though the crosswind was within my limit and the weather, like cloud base, was pretty high, I think it was like 3,000 feet. My instructor came back from an earlier flight and reported severe turbulence to the point where he just said, it's just not worth doing it. You just end up going up and going, oh, blow this, I'm coming back down. It one of those classic cases of people on the ground wishing they were in the air and people in the air wishing they were on the ground. I've been in that position many occasions, and yeah, my instructor's got quite a high weather threshold, so when he says don't go up, that's basically a way of saying it's really bad. So unfortunately didn't get to get those soloing, but hopefully we'll be able to do that next week. Weather's a bit hit and miss again, but there we go. That's life here in New Zealand. You get good weeks, you get bad weeks, and yeah, weather's playing a big part. So on that note, thank you very much for watching the video. Feel free to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to share the video with anyone who you feel might be interested in this series or becoming a commercial airline pilot. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Bye bye.